Wonder why women can recall the exact shade of the shirt you wore on your first date 3 years ago, while you're struggling to remember what you had for lunch yesterday. It's not just a personality quirk or a case of paying more attention. It runs deeper than that, into the wiring of the brain, into chemistry, into how anticipation itself becomes an emotional experience rather than just a waiting period. To understand this, you have to look at something called the anticipation effect. Most people assume that the real reward, the gift, the promotion, the kiss, is where the pleasure peaks. But in the female brain, something fascinating happens. The emotional high often builds before the moment even arrives. The waiting, the imagining, the wondering, that's where the magic lives. Dopamine, the chemical tied to motivation and pleasure, doesn't just activate at the end, it surges during the buildup. That quiet excitement before a message appears, the preparation before a night out, the slow unfolding of possibility. Sometimes the maybe carries more emotional weight than the yes. And if you've ever felt confused by that, if you've ever wondered why something that seemed small to you felt big to her, this is where it starts to make sense. Think about a time you were waiting for something meaningful. Not the outcome itself, but the feeling of anticipation. Now imagine that feeling being even stronger, more vivid, more emotionally layered. That's what many women experience regularly. Tell me in the comments, have you ever noticed this in your own life or in someone close to you? Those moments where the buildup felt almost more intense than the outcome itself? I'd really love to hear your perspective, because this is where understanding begins. I'm Mary Smith, host of the Senior Mindful Living YouTube channel, and today we're gently unpacking the deeper layers of female psychology. Not to judge, not to generalize, but to understand, to connect, and to bring more awareness into the way we relate to each other. Now let's go a little deeper into how reality itself can quietly shape a woman's inner world. There's a concept in psychology known as the illusory truth effect. And despite how it sounds, it has nothing to do with intelligence or logic. It's about repetition. When a message, any message, is repeated often enough, the brain begins to accept it as truth, not because it's accurate, but because it's familiar. Imagine a young woman hearing subtle comments growing up. You're too much. You should be quieter. You need to look a certain way to be loved. At first, these are just words, but over time, repeated again and again, through media, through relationships, through social environments, they begin to settle into the subconscious. They stop being questioned, they become internalized. And here's the powerful part. The brain isn't malfunctioning when this happens. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do. Recognize patterns quickly for survival. Thousands of years ago, this helped people adapt to their communities. But today, it can mean absorbing narratives that don't serve us. This is why the environment matters so much. The voices someone hears repeatedly, whether supportive or critical, don't just pass through. They shape identity, they influence confidence, they quietly rewrite self-perception. Let me share a simple example. I once worked with a woman who believed she was bad at relationships. Not because of one failure, but because she had heard that narrative her entire life, from family, from past partners, even from her own inner voice. When we unpacked it, there was no real evidence to support it, but the repetition had made it feel true. So here's a small exercise for you. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, what's one belief about yourself that you've heard so many times, you've stopped questioning it? And is it actually true or just familiar? Now, let's talk about something even more profound, the mirror effect. This is where empathy moves beyond emotion and becomes biology. The brain contains something called mirror neurons. These neurons activate not only when you experience something, but when you observe someone else experiencing it. So when a woman sits across from someone who is anxious, excited, hurt, or joyful, her brain doesn't just register it intellectually. It begins to simulate that emotional state internally. It's what we call emotional contagion. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the tension without anyone saying a word? Or felt lighter just being around someone calm and grounded? That's this system at work. And while everyone has this ability, many women experience it more intensely. It's part of what allows them to connect deeply, to sense subtle shifts, to respond with empathy. But here's the part that often goes unseen: the cost. Because when you feel everything so vividly, you also absorb more. A toxic environment doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it becomes draining on a neurological level. A harsh tone doesn't just sound unpleasant, it can linger emotionally far longer. I remember a woman who described it beautifully. She said, It's like I don't just hear people, I feel them. And if you've ever felt that way, you know how exhausting it can be. So if you're someone who relates to this, here's something important. Your sensitivity is not a weakness, but it does require boundaries. You're allowed to step away from environments that overwhelm you. You're allowed to protect your energy. Now let's explore something that often gets misunderstood, the reactance trigger. Have you ever noticed how something suddenly becomes more appealing the moment it feels out of reach? That's not coincidence. It's a deeply wired response. When a woman senses that her choices are being restricted, even subtly, her brain activates a drive to reclaim that autonomy. It's not about being difficult, it's about protecting the fundamental need for self-determination. And when you look at this through a historical lens, it makes even more sense. For generations, women have faced limitations, social, cultural, personal, so the internal system that pushes back against restriction has become highly sensitive. This is why respect matters so deeply, not just surface-level politeness, but genuine respect for autonomy. Because the moment someone feels controlled rather than understood, a defensive wall can rise instantly. Let's bring this into a real-life scenario. Imagine someone saying, "You shouldn't wear that." Even if the intention isn't harmful, the phrasing triggers resistance. Now compare that to, how do you feel in that? One invites control, the other invites choice. And that difference changes everything. Now let's talk about something that often gets misinterpreted: emotional memory. Many people assume that when women bring up past experiences, it's about holding on to grudges. But in reality, it's something much more complex. The brain prioritizes emotionally charged experiences. When something carries strong emotion, joy, pain, fear, it gets encoded more deeply. It's not stored casually, it's marked as important. So a seemingly small moment, an offhand comment, a tone of voice, can become a vivid memory if it carried emotional weight at the time. Think of it like this: not every moment gets saved, but the ones that do are stored in high definition. I once spoke with someone who remembered a single sentence her partner said years ago, not because of the words themselves, but because of how it made her feel in that moment. That feeling became the memory. And here's where understanding matters. When those memories resurface, it's not about trying to win an argument. It's about navigating a detailed emotional map. So instead of asking, "Why are you bringing this up again?" a more helpful question might be, "What did that moment mean to you?" Because beneath the memory is often a feeling that's still asking to be understood. Now let's gently shift into something that many people have heard, but few truly understand: the myth of multitasking. A soft, present gaze builds connection instantly, but an intense, prolonged stare without emotional context can trigger discomfort. Women are often highly attuned to these subtle differences. And yes, many women become incredibly skilled at this, moving from one responsibility to another quickly, adapting, responding, shifting focus in seconds. But internally, there's a cost. Every time the brain switches tasks, it has to disengage from one set of rules and activate another. That transition requires energy, and when it happens repeatedly throughout the day, it builds up into mental fatigue. So, what looks like efficiency is often a high-speed burn of cognitive energy. If you're someone who finds yourself constantly switching roles throughout the day, try this simple exercise. Give yourself intentional pauses between tasks. A breath, a reset, a moment to let your mind settle before shifting again. Because your brain isn't a machine, it's a living, responsive system. Now let's move into something subtle but incredibly powerful: the foot in the door effect. When someone agrees to a small request, it doesn't just stay external. Internally, it begins to shape how they see themselves. Once that identity starts forming, it creates a natural desire to stay consistent with it. This is why boundaries can feel so difficult. Not because someone doesn't want to say no, but because saying no creates internal tension. Next time you feel that pressure, pause and ask yourself, am I saying yes because I want to, or because I feel I have to stay consistent? That single question can create space for a more honest choice. Now let's talk about something deeply human: eye contact. When a woman experiences genuine, respectful eye contact, it can trigger the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. This creates a sense of connection, warmth, and trust. But here's where nuance matters. The same eye contact that feels comforting in one context can feel uncomfortable in another. It's not just about the gaze itself. It's about intention, timing, and energy. A soft, present gaze builds connection instantly, but an intense, prolonged stare without emotional context can trigger discomfort. Women are often highly attuned to these subtle differences. Now let's explore something that quietly keeps people stuck: the sunk cost trap. This is the belief that because you've invested time, energy, or emotion into something, you should continue, even when it's no longer serving you. But here's the truth: what's already invested is gone. It cannot be recovered by staying longer. The real shift happens when the focus moves from the past to the future. Not, what have I already lost, but what do I deserve moving forward? If I were starting today, knowing what I know now, would I choose this again? And finally, we come to the most important truth of all. At the core of human connection, especially in female psychology, emotions are the lasting currency. Words can fade, details can blur, logic can be forgotten, but feelings stay. Because the emotional imprint is what the brain prioritizes for long-term storage. This is why you can't repair emotional wounds with logic alone. You can't replace presence with material gestures. You can't override a feeling with explanation. But you can create new emotional experiences, moments of genuine listening, moments of respect, moments where someone feels truly seen. Those are the moments that build trust, that create connection, that last. So as you move forward, whether in relationships, friendships, or even how you speak to yourself, remember this: it's not just what you say, it's not just what you do. It's how you make someone feel while you're doing it. If this resonated with you, if even one part made you pause and reflect, take a moment to share your thoughts below. And if you'd like to explore more conversations like this, gentle, honest, and deeply human, consider subscribing and becoming part of this growing community. Understanding each other isn't just powerful, it's transformative.